My name is Elara Vance, and I have worn a porcelain mask every day since I was 7 years old. The barn fire stole my parents and the left half of my face, leaving scars like melted candle wax forever. I hid on this ranch for 17 years, speaking only through a slate because my voice felt too broken. The mask became my armor, a cold shield between the world and the ruin I could never bear to show. Then, one autumn evening, a drifter rode through my gate, his silhouette painted by the dying amber sunset. He didn't ask for water or work. He simply said he heard music and followed it straight here. It was my mother's music box, a tin heart that played a waltz only I could still hear. He looked at me, and his eyes never flickered to the mask, only into my uncovered right eye. I lifted my slate and wrote, "You should leave," but he smiled and sat on my porch instead. He said his name was Gideon Cross, a man with no destination and a past full of shadows. For a week, he stayed in my barn, mending fences I couldn't fix, never once asking about my face. I watched him from the window, and I began to play the music box more, just to see him. One morning, I dropped my slate and it shattered, and panic seized my throat because I couldn't speak. He knelt, gathered the broken pieces, and said, "You don't need words for me to hear you." That night, I wrote on a new slate, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" And he read it slowly. He answered, "Because the only thing scary about you is how long you've been alone and unseen." I felt something crack inside my chest, a wall I had built so high even I forgot light. Gideon told me he had been a medic in the war and had seen wounds far deeper than skin. He said scars weren't shame but maps of survival, and mine led to the strongest woman he'd known. I wanted to believe him, but the mask clung to my face like a promise I made my dead parents. The town of Dry Creek knew me only as Masked Girl, a ghost who came for supplies after dark. They whispered that my face was cursed, and mothers pulled their children away when my wagon passed by. Gideon rode into town one day and heard the taunts, and he came back with fire in his eyes. He stood before me and said, "They don't deserve to see you, but you deserve to be free." I traced the porcelain edge and wrote, "What if you see me and your kindness finally turns to disgust?" He took my hand, the one that held the slate, and pressed it gently against his own scarred ribs. Beneath his shirt, I felt ridges of old shrapnel wounds, a hidden map of agony he never displayed publicly. You see, Elara, we all wear masks. Some just happen to be made of skin and silence. That was the moment I knew I loved him, a love that terrified me more than any mirror. A month later, cattle baron Harlan Grange rode up with his men, demanding I sell my land cheaply. He pointed at my mask and laughed. "No man will marry you, so sell before you die alone." Gideon stepped between us, and his voice was cold iron when he said, "She's not alone. Not anymore." Grange sneered and made a wager. If I removed my mask in the town square, he'd pay double. If I refused, he would seize the ranch through a crook judge he had in his back pocket. I stood frozen, my hands trembling, the mask suddenly heavier than a branding iron pressed to my soul. Gideon turned to me, ignoring the crowd, and whispered, "You don't owe them a thing, not 1 inch." But I looked at him and realized I owed myself the truth after 17 years of silent hiding. The next morning, the entire town gathered, a sea of hungry eyes waiting to see the monster unveiled. Gideon held my hand as I walked to the wooden platform, my heart pounding like a caged bird. Harlan Grange smirked, a vulture circling, and the crowd hushed with a cruel anticipation that stung my skin. I reached behind my head and unclasped the porcelain mask with fingers that felt made of fragile glass. The mask fell away, and I lifted my scarred face to the sun, my tears tracing the ravaged skin. A collective gasp rose, and I heard a child cry out, but I only looked at Gideon beside me. His eyes held no shock, no pity, only a fierce and tender love that wrapped around my bared soul. He spoke so all could hear. "This is the face of a survivor, the most beautiful woman I know." Then he knelt on that dusty platform and pulled out a simple silver ring from his vest pocket. "Elara Vance, will you let the whole world see what I see and marry this wandering man?" My voice, rusty from disuse, cracked open and I said aloud, "Yes, Gideon, 1,000 times, yes." The crowd's gasp transformed into scattered applause, and Grange's face purpled with rage because he had lost completely. I never wore the mask again, not on my wedding day, not when our daughter was born the next spring. The scarred skin felt the wind and the rain, and every sensation was a new chapter of freedom earned. Gideon and I built a bigger porch, and I learned to speak again, my voice growing stronger each sunset. We told our daughter, Mercy, the story of how a music box drew a drifter to an isolated soul. She touches my scars and calls them Mama's star map, and I weep with gratitude for that pure view. Harlan Grange tried to burn our barn, but the town rallied, protecting the woman they once feared and mocked. Grange died broke and friendless, and I realized pity is a poison, but forgiveness had freed my heart. Gideon's old shrapnel wounds ached in winter, and I became his healer, a role he once held for me. We grew old on this ranch, two scarred souls who found beauty in the shattered pieces of each other. Every evening, I sit on the porch without my mask, feeling the sunset warm my entire face with peace. The music box still plays its waltz, and sometimes Gideon dances with me under a canopy of desert stars. We are proof that love doesn't erase scars. It illuminates them as monuments of the battles we won. I often recall the first day he arrived, how he didn't flinch, and I thank fate for his persistence. My slate hangs on the wall, a relic of a time when I was too afraid to let sound escape. Now I sing to my grandchildren, and they never ask about the scars, only about the waltz I hum. So, if you see someone hiding behind a mask, remember that a single act of seeing can liberate a soul. Please subscribe to Stories Hub Official, smash that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have the courage to unmask your deepest fear for the one who truly sees your worth? Thank you for listening to our story, and may you always recognize the beauty hiding behind every porcelain shield. When the first autumn leaves fell after we married, Gideon carved a new music box from the old oak tree. He shaped it like a heart and painted it with stars, and inside he placed the original tin mechanism inside. I cried when he wound the key, because the waltz sounded richer, as if my parents were singing along with it. Our daughter Mercy was born with Gideon's calm eyes and my mother's dark hair, a perfect blend of histories. I held her against my scarred cheek, and she nuzzled there without flinching, and I felt reborn as a mother. Gideon built a cradle from the same oak, sanding it smooth until it gleamed like amber in the morning light. We taught Mercy never to fear scars, whether on skin or in memory, because they tell stories worth hearing. One day, a traveling photographer came, and we sat for a portrait, my bare face smiling wide for the lens. The photograph hung in the town hall, not as a curiosity, but as a symbol of the town's own transformation. The children who once stared now came to our ranch for apple picking, and they never asked about my face. They only asked Gideon to tell war stories, and he told them about courage, not battles, and they listened quietly. My voice, once so lost, became the one that read aloud at the schoolhouse every Christmas, a gift I gave. I read stories of brave women and loyal drifters, always ending with the line, "Beauty lives where you choose to look." Gideon passed away on a spring morning, his hand in mine, the music box playing its gentle waltz softly. I buried him under the oak, and I placed the silver ring back on his finger before the earth covered him. I wear his old coat on cold days, and I still feel his touch guiding me through the silence he left. My grandchildren now run this ranch, and I tell them the story of a drifter who recognized a masked soul. They beg for the waltz, and I wind the box, and we dance as Gideon taught me, full of hope. I will join him soon, but I leave this testimony. Love sees what the world hides and never forgets. So if a stranger rides through your gate, look into their eyes before you look at any mask they might wear. This is the truth of Elara and Gideon. and it lives in every heart willing to see past the porcelain. May your own scars become star maps, and may someone love you enough to trace them with gentle wonder.